Josh Ward joins us now of the Sports Animal. Josh, how are you, sir?
I'm great. Great to be with you guys.
Hey, so we were just talking about before we get to your second year surge players that are on offthehooksports.com or will be here around noon. But before we get to those guys, we were talking earlier about the Kirby Smart comments and the Mel Kiper comments about Joe Milton came in against Clemson, the Orange Bowl, and all this stuff. And I have a contention that people don't like Hendon Hooker just because he's too good. Like Tim Tebow. You were waiting for him to mess up. And I use LeBron James too, who off the court has done tremendous things. I just feel like some look at Hendon Hooker and say there's got to be a flaw there. There's got to be something wrong. I mean, do you see what I'm saying? And all everybody's waiting for the other shoe to drop.
Maybe so. I think most people like Hendon. He didn't make it to New York for the Heisman, and that still is a little confusing. But I think there's a good chance he would have been there if he hadn't suffered the injury and just exited the conversation at the end of the season after the South Carolina game. And Tennessee lost that game. That didn't help. So I find that a lot of people like him, but with what Kirby said, I think it's natural, especially if you're talking about a program that's going to try to hold off Tennessee. And Georgia doesn't have to worry about Tennessee, but has to be aware of what's going on with the program. It's easier if you're in that position to try to dismiss what Tennessee is doing and point to the system, which then ends up being kind of an attack on the player. And there's an NFL draft aspect to that. But over the last several weeks, despite what Tennessee's system is, a lot of analysts are coming out saying, man, I really like this Hendon guy. And I think he really impressed NFL teams at the Senior Bowl and during the combine and then pro day process that he's gone through. So I think a lot of people like Hendon, but I do think it's natural when you see someone have success quickly, kind of out of nowhere, to try to find reasons to dismiss that.
Let's talk about your second year surge players that'll be on offthehooksports.com. And this would be, I would think, the year after you get players a full year in your system that you would start to see the impact of Josh Heupel's recruiting in reality. Like we saw some Dylan Sampson last year, but I mean, this year to me is where you really start to see some traction there.
Yes, Sampson's a part of that piece, and he played in a couple of games where fans were able to see exactly how effective he can be in Tennessee's offense with his burst, his speed. In that second half against Missouri, he had a couple of plays where he kind of shot out of the backfield in a way that his teammates are not able to do. Not a knock on them, but he had a different ability that could really be effective in Tennessee's offense, especially with as fast as it goes, with the speed that he has on the field. But he also had some understandable expected flaws. In the LSU game he's in playing, and that was a game where he's going back home, but made a big mistake in pass protection, got Hendon hit, ball pops out loose. He hadn't made a heads-up play to grab the ball, but pass protection is always the number one question for a freshman running back, and it was the number one concern Tennessee coaches had, and he talked about it this week. So Sampson, guys on the edge on defense have to step up. Joshua Josephs and James Pierce. With Byron Young gone, it's not just Josephs and Pierce, but they stand out from a talent standpoint. We saw Josephs play last year. It's obvious the staff likes him. If they can play at a higher level, if Pierce is a guy that they can count on to go along with Tyler Barron and Roman Harrison, then Tennessee's defense on the edge could be more effective than it was last year. And then one other guy, Squirrel White, I even wrote in there, does he count? Because we've already seen him kind of surge a little bit in the Orange Bowl, but he is obviously a second-year player to watch with an expanded role likely this upcoming year.
Josh, is there a bit of, I don't want to use the word frustration, but I really don't have a better term, with Addison Nichols in the sense of there was a lot of hype behind him last year. As a freshman, he seemed to show flashes of becoming great. Now they're actually having to work him into the rotation because there is no backup behind Cooper Mays. And it just doesn't seem like has he made the transition yet from raw potential to actually picking up the offense?
Well, he's on my list, but I wrote it more in terms of being ready as a backup at center. Could he potentially start at guard? That is on the table, but it doesn't seem like that's getting as much attention for Nichols. A year ago, during the spring, Josh Heupel said Addison Nichols is going to be a great player, and made sure to emphasize not good, great for Tennessee. He is just entering his second year, and that can be difficult on the offensive line in the SEC, but he was a highly touted player that Tennessee targeted and went after very quickly out of the Atlanta area. So I don't know if there's frustration with him. Let's find out how the next 10 days go, and if we see him in the spring game playing a vital role on the starting line with Cooper Mays having been out. Cooper's the leader there on the interior. He's so important, and you know him and have seen over the last year what he brings to the table from a leadership standpoint, management on the offensive line. That really matters. Addison, I think, has all that potential for Tennessee as well over the next couple of years. But is he ready right now? They may need him to be. Yeah, either in a backup role or if nobody else emerges that they're comfortable with at left guard.
Another guy that you mentioned, second-year surge story going on up around noon today from Josh Ward. It'll be on offthehooksports.com. And Tennessee wants to play vertical in this defense. And I think that's going to continue even as they get more depth. I think they want to be an attacking style. So how important is it that Tyree West gets north and south, young man?
Well, it helps that they have a number of guys.
See what I did there? The north and south end, young man. Tyree West.
North
A little bit.
I mean, you have to stop and point it out. It's kind of brutal. I thought it was too layered, though. Go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, we'll turn east as quickly as possible after that one. But I think he's important because he's one of the most talented defensive linemen. But the really impressive thing Tennessee has done is they've developed guys. They've targeted players who can come in and at least be a part of the rotation, like Tremblay, who came in from USC a couple of years ago, and Omar Norman-Lott, who's come in as a transfer from Arizona State, who should play along with the defensive line rotation. But with Latrell Bumpus gone, he was an important player, a leader on the defensive line. They have Amari Thomas, who is probably their top guy there in that role. But West takes no backseat to anybody in terms of talent, ability, can rush the passer as a big guy close to 300 pounds. So his ability to play a regular role on the defensive line this year is what we talk about when we discuss what Tennessee's defense needs to do if Tennessee's going to try to get to the level, remain on the level of Alabama, Georgia, LSU, those programs that have been at the top. And I know about the wins individually last season, but to really be a part of that level, you have to have that kind of talent up front in the SEC. So same as the offensive line conversation, on the defensive line, you need as many game-changing players as possible, and Tyree West fits that profile.
Something we didn't see as much last year because of the profile of the defensive lineman that we saw in 2021 was you brought up Caleb Tremblay. I didn't know a word to use at the time, so I called it like a hybrid defensive lineman because Tremblay and Jaquan Blakely could both play in the middle or on the edge because they were kind of that tweener size. They were like in the 270 range. I thought Dominic Bailey was going to be that, but I haven't really seen that from him yet. Is there anybody else that could fit that profile this year for Tennessee?
Well, maybe this is that year for Bailey. Rodney Garner talked about him recently. He was a 4-star prospect out of the Maryland area and got some conversation last year. So I think he's continued to develop. He just wasn't a high-impact, immediate player for the defensive line. Amari Thomas, as I mentioned, I think he's that all-SEC level player for Tennessee. I think he has a good chance to be an NFL player for several years after this. But that's why this second-year group, so Pierce, Josephs, and Tyree West all together, they need all three, I think, to step up and emerge. And they might have more defined roles. But, West is that kind of guy where – think about the Georgia game a year ago. So if we go to the best of the best, Georgia has been that. So much of the conversation that game going in was, okay, the tackle position for Tennessee is so solidified. Look at what they've done. Look what they did against Ojulari and Will Anderson. But who wrecked that game? It was Jalen Carter on the interior of the defensive line. So Tennessee needs to continue to recruit and develop guys on the edge, like Caleb Herring, who's a freshman who could contribute right away this year. He's at least competing for that chance. But on the interior, they need more guys that can be difference-making players. And I think Amari has shown that he is that for Tennessee, and Tyree West is going to have a chance to be that too. But Dominic Bailey, is for sure a player that they're going to count on in the rotation. Omar Norman-Lott, who I mentioned. So the names and the number of players that they can count on is starting to add up. Think about all the different positions. Typically, when we talk about depth, we're talking about in case of injury. That's not the case on the defensive line. When we talk about depth, we're talking about guys that need to play.
Yep. Great stuff on second-year surge, guys. That'll be on offthehooksports.com. We're still blowing up with the Hendon Hooker talk after we talked Kirby and Mel Kiper Jr. earlier in the program. Let me get both you guys to finish this sentence. Tennessee fans want more out of Josh Dobbs in an NFL career than any player since. I'm sorry, did I say Josh Dobbs? Hendon Hooker. Excuse me, Hendon Hooker. I just feel like Tennessee fans really want him to succeed in the NFL the most since. And you guys fill in the blank. Would it be since Josh Dobbs? Would it be before that?
I'd have to think off the top of my head, but it's more than Josh Dobbs because he went in with such a low expectation of where he was drafted. I think there was hope that he could become a starter, and he still might have a chance to be that after what we saw with the Titans. But right now, Josh is still in a backup role going back to Cleveland. But we just haven't seen it at that position. Quarterback is going to get so much more attention than any other position. I think there was excitement of what Alvin Kamara might be able to do, but he was drafted later by the Saints, but he made such a quick impact, and there's the fantasy football aspect. So Tennessee fans could vent about his lack of usage at Tennessee. They could draft him on their fantasy teams, and they could enjoy watching him make big plays. But quarterback is just different. And Tennessee, despite having a bunch of really quality quarterbacks, they haven't had that guy that went on to the next level in the NFL for fans to follow since Peyton. I mean, that's how long it's been. So
could it be T. Martin, since I think a lot of people wanted him to have great success in the NFL because of what he did in 98?
I mean, maybe it's so much more realistic to me for Hendon for that to be a possibility. I think you need to see guys go out there and play and have a chance. So a lot of it's going to come back to the skill positions. Like, I think Tennessee fans love seeing Trey Smith do what he's doing for the Chiefs, but it's difficult to say I have this expectation for what he's going to be as a right guard. So quarterback is its own separate category, but Hendon to me is, if we're talking about quarterbacks, I think he runs away with it compared to the other quarterbacks just because of the opportunity that's expected, probably being a first or second round pick, which means that team is going to draft him to play him at some point when the other quarterbacks, Caleb, they were saying, okay, maybe this guy will get a shot at some point, but we kind of have to wait on it.
Good stuff. You can listen to Josh from noon to 3 on the Sports Animal in Knoxville, and we appreciate you as always, Josh. Have a great rest of the week.
You too. Thanks a lot, guys.